Well, it's not working in prod. Indeed, it's not working in prod. Well, it's not my problem. It works just fine on my machine and on the dev server. Well,
I told you all systems are ISOs. And if it's working in dev, it's working in prod.
it's ISO?
Oh yeah, essentially, I mean, pretty much almost.
Almost? What do you mean, almost?
You know, there's maybe a very small gap in minor versions, and for some plugins. Nothing particularly important.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. If you are in chat, please sound off in chat if you like to. Tell us where you're at. I always love to see where everybody's watching from. Say hello. Thanks for joining us. Ben, hello. How are you?
I'm pretty good, Peter. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm glad to have you back on. It's always fun to chat with you, have you on the show, talk a whole bunch of product stuff and cool things. You always have a couple surprises. Wait, did I maybe I'm setting you up here. Maybe I'm not.
Yeah,
anyways,
we'll have some bits to look at and play with today.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited for some things for sure. I don't want to give it away, but anyways, if you don't mind, tell everybody who might not know who Ben is from Docker. Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
So I'm Ben. I'm a product manager at Docker. Been here for about 2 years, which has been good fun. I've worked on, I think, every product of Docker's now. So I started off on desktop, then I've done some bits on Engine, CLI, Compose, Build, and now doing some bits on Hub. Prior to Docker, I was at Amazon for a couple of years. I worked in Alexa, so the bit where you go, like, what's the capital of France? And hopefully she says Paris. So I worked on that bit. Doing international launches there. So that was quite fun, doing sort of knowledge graphs and those sort of things.
Yeah, cool. Wait, only 2 years at Docker?
Yeah, only 2 years.
Wow, seems a lot longer, at least for me. But yeah,
if it helps other people say that, it feels like no time at all to me.
That's what happens when you're having fun, right?
Exactly, and it's all fun.
Yeah, but seriously, I think Ben has worked on every product. I know internally, if I need a question and I'm like, oh, who to go, Ben will know. Ben will either know or he'll get me pointed in the right direction 100%. Right? Okay, wait. So Alexa. So Alexa, that's pretty cool. That's a pretty interesting globally with languages and language interpret. I don't even know the correct terms to say, right? Like it's not easy. It's not easy to answer questions with us average citizens in the way we speak uncorrectly formed English.
Yeah, it was good fun. So I worked on international launches. So I worked on French, Italian, Spanish, tail end of Japanese. Yeah, it's good fun. Like going from the voice to text and actually getting the questions to answer is an interesting challenge, and it produces some quite weird edge cases as well, which are always quite fun to pursue.
Okay, what's one that you can talk about without making anybody look bad, but would be interesting?
So there's a fixed one now, which is where you used to be able to say what is called spider, and Alexa would just sit there and go spider, 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 and she'd just shout the word spider at you over and over again. And it was quite an interesting issue, which was that the way a knowledge graph works is you've got triples. So you have 3 objects. So you've got Paris is the capital of France. That's how a knowledge graph works. That's the relation. And each object then has words that refer to it. So London has London, capital of the London, all these other forms of it. You call those lexemes. Now, the issue was that lots of things had the word spider attached to them. And Black Widow had spider attached because it could be referred to as a spider in some contexts. So when you asked what's called spider, it took everything that had the word spider attached to it and then gave you the name back. But unfortunately, it also indexed it on the word that you gave it and increased the probability of using that word to answer. That's like a super short version of why. What it meant was every object called spider that had spider associated with it in the knowledge graph, it would shout the word spider at you, which was just great fun. And it would say it slightly differently, intonate it slightly differently if that spider had a lowercase s or a capital S. So it would just go spider, 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 spider. So that was quite a fun bug. It's an interesting one. Like, it's a really small example of how like it was a hard problem space, but it was a fun bug to come out with.
Yeah, that's cool. My brother, so my younger brother, I won't say which one because I have a couple brothers. I won't call them out on the internets, but is deathly afraid of spiders. I wish that bug wasn't fixed. I would get him Alexa and just every time I'm over, what is spider? Yeah, he is like, yeah, deathly afraid of spider. Like you hear phobias, right? Until okay, what? I mean, like physically, we'll run out of the room with the spider. Yeah, it's funny and then a little sad at the same time. No, but anyways, well, awesome, man. Well, thanks again for coming on. We've got a bunch of stuff to show. Do you want to just? I say we just jump right into it.
Yeah, so what I wanted to kind of go through today was a little bit of how Docker does product management, a little bit how we actually think about kind of the bit after we've identified a customer pain point and a problem. So the way, but we'll start there and then we'll do that very quickly, and then we'll actually go into what comes after that. So how we ideate designs and where that goes from and how we come up with solutions. So Docker does kind of problem, pain-driven development, which means that we're looking for things that are hard, things that are painful, that we can solve, that we can improve and make developers' lives better. And really the philosophy, if it's a pain point that would be nearly impossible to solve for a new user, so it feels like magic if we solve it, and if it would be hard to solve for a power user, but they could do it, but us solving it would be a nice time saving, that's perfect. That's exactly the area we want to be working and playing in. So once we've done that, we then kind of, particularly with visual things, we sort of enter like a more of a flow of how are we going to actually come up with that feature. So let me share my screen and we'll walk through some of this because it'll be a bit of fun.
Sounds good.
Screen don't want to share the one with us on, but then I'll minimize us. Otherwise we'll get a bit meta. There we go.
Ready?
Right. Can you see my presentation? Is it pretty?
It is glorious.
Good. There I can move that. So when it comes to, it's got really dark outside. What we then start doing is, so in this instance, what we were thinking of is how can we improve the user flows in Docker Desktop from what we have today. So we start off by going, who are we targeting? What's the shape of the customer we're targeting? And we've kind of got like this canonical developer team that we target and we think of when we're thinking about our customers and who we're trying to serve. And they work at a little company we made up, which is a pet insurance company. And here we've got a little architecture diagram for them and everything that we think about when we're thinking about them.
Wait, I got to pause there and just can I give a little peek behind? That is Ben's favorite company to work with, is the pet insurance company. There's a whole kind of story behind it. We won't go into it, but yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah, I came up with it in one slide. I started adding to it. Got a little reference architecture. Hi, everyone. And yeah, I got really into, so I've now got like a little team. It's got people. We've got a reference architecture. It's very much what you'd expect from like that sort of customer persona driven development. And we're constantly iterating these. We try and revisit these personas and we're trying to add more and more detail to them. Sort of nearly every month, we try and iterate these and add more detail and say, hey, is this right? Is this right pain points to solve, and try and dig deeper with them. But yeah, I've not got my pet shop in this deck. Unfortunately. People would laugh at my little architecture. So we go from that and we then kind of get into what are the user flows that we're trying to solve. So the particular flows we're looking to address in this case. What are we trying to make easier for people? Who's that? What tools are they doing? And really get right into the detail of the tools, the steps, and what's painful in there. And then we use feedback, conversations with developers, feedback from the community channels, what people are saying, to bring that together. And this is also then combined with like customer interviews. So I'll go out and I'll speak to people. Like if anyone does want to chat to me at any point, drop me a tweet, drop me an email. Very happy to chat with any developer, really. I want to spend a few hours a week doing it. So we got that. We then start to do like some high-level designs and user flows of what might solve, when we might want to focus. Being fully remote, one thing we found is quite fun is doing dot voting. So we'll put these kind of into somewhere like Miro, and then we'll all sit there and we'll all get like 5 dots each, and we'll go, cool, everyone put your dots where you think we should focus, or the features you think we should work on. You can see here actually the outcome of some of that dot voting on these pictures. We put these into one thing, I think we only got 2 or 3 each here. I think 3 each. But you can see like where we got this clustering around the things we thought we should focus on.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the dot. It removes doubt of, at least for me, right? Confirmation bias, right? I think everybody is thinking the same way I'm thinking, right? And then you start putting dots and you're like, oh, that's a great point. It was very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a nice way to do sort of that clustering, voting, people putting like sticky notes next to things to vote, but it's a really nice remote first way to handle that when you're working sort of these collaborative tools. And it's one we're using quite a lot at the moment to kind of do that. Where should we cluster? Where should we focus? And really let us home in on what we want to do. As you know, you can all go broad in these sort of big activities. Like I think in this one, actually, the one with the boring boxes is the one that I drew, and other people sketched theirs on bits of paper, unlike me. We then took pictures and loaded it in, and then we all voted on where we should focus. So we had loads of ideas. We're like, okay, what area do we want to focus on first? So having kind of homed that in, we then start to actually come up with ideas to get feedback. So this is one I think I showed a little bit of this at the community all hands, but this is one of our ideas of how we're going to change, or might change, not definitely, but might change the whale menu for Docker Desktop. So just looking at the outcome of all of those was we've got our persona. We know our persona's main goals, which are just to do a few small, simple actions. We know from feedback, from data, the number of objects people are likely to have to know how much we might display. We kind of came to, okay, do people want to open a big UI? We got the feedback, or do they just want to do something quickly or have quick access to a few simple things like the ports, like to stop, start, and restart? And how can we make that even more accessible? And this is kind of what we came up with from that. And then from that, we start to kind of play around.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to highlight, I know the whole company, well, not the whole company, from leadership down, always looks at all the feedback, is doing interviews. They're all posted internally. NPS scores, even the comments you put in there come directly to the company, and we 100% read those. So please keep sending them. And I know Ben and his teams, they're talking to customers constantly.
Yeah, we genuinely, like, a lot of people, you see the odd NPS comment, like people get angry about it, but honestly, we read every single NPS comment. We did some analysis on how angry NPS comments make people a while ago. I'll be honest, it was like 20 or 30% of our NPS comments are people saying, please don't ask us NPS, which made me quite sad because the other comments are really useful.
Yeah.
And we do read all of those and take the feedback on board. We don't know who submitted it, but we do read all of them and take the feedback on board.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, when the goal of getting designs like this is actually then start sharing them in forums like this and asking for feedback. I'm going to be uploading a few of these onto the Docker roadmap in the next few days for more feedback for do people like these. github.com/docker/roadmap-1. It's our roadmap. Thank you. Oh, look, you were organized and prepared with a little link to it. Check that out. And you got like the presenter power to make it look cool as well.
Yes.
We've already got a few of these on there a little bit just to get some feedback, but we're going to get more of these up there just to get your feedback on like what would you like to do, what would you like to see. Do you just care about containers and apps, or should we also kind of add images in there as well? Do people also want to see images? Do people want to know if images are out of date on their machine? And this is one that we did demo at community all hands that we've actually got some experiments going on. Is kind of that ability to get notified either on build or on build or on run if you've got out of date images on your machine. And that's one we're quite interested in how we can explore. We're interested in exploring this year to see if that's the sort of thing people will be interested in. Do people care if their local images are out of date? I'm guessing so. Feedback says yes so far, but
yeah, that's a super interesting one, right? Because as an engineer, I might have my strong opinion, and it's not a matter of right or wrong, right? It's what people want, right? Like what's helping the majority of people the most, I would think. Is that correct? Kind of how you think about some of the features? I know it's very complicated, but.
Yeah, so most of the features are, does it solve a pain for enough people? Like, is having out-of-date images causing pain and issues for people? And who is that pain impacted, and how can we help them? So in this, who's impacted by having out-of-date images? Well, it can impact production. It can impact your security risk. It can impact how you're working locally. It can mean that if you've got a base image in your Teams org and people are updating it, you can know how to sync with your team when you're trying to make changes, and you might have incompatible changes if versions have changed in lower layers in the image. And can we remove that pain? Can we automate it away? So, the goal of any developer tool should be it reduces the number of sort of boring, mundane, or repetitive tasks a developer's doing. It gives them more time to just write code and be creative. So we with that lens on, and with that other lens of, if it's magic for a new user and a nice time saving for a pro user, how can we? It's raining really heavily. Hope you guys can't hear that. How can we build that into the product? So you go pain point. Is it magic? Does it still solve something for a power user? Is it magic, but only until a certain point? Or is it always going to be a time saving? Does it reduce the number of boring, mundane, and repetitive tasks? If it kind of fits that criteria, which we think updating images does, just to make it magic that your images stay up to date and you're notified and told why you should update, then we start to do this sort of exploration and work out what those user flows could look like and what the product could look like to kind of get people's feedback before you even write any code. Yeah,
awesome. I have one more question, and maybe you're going to cover this later, but there's always that balance, right? And I think maybe Steve Jobs I'll probably wrongly attribute it to him, but he has some saying to the effect that users are wrong, right?
Yeah,
that they don't users don't know what they want, right? What's your take on that, right? Like how do you balance? You can get a lot of noise from a bunch of feedback, right? And we have some really smart folks in-house, right? Like how do you balance that, right? Like, well, users don't really know what they want until they see it, but then they also do know what they want, and we don't know what they want, right?
Yeah, it's raining very heavily now. I apologize. Hopefully you can't hear it.
I can hear it a little bit. It gives a nice ambiance.
Oh, good. That's what I was after. That's why I turned it on right now. Better turn you up though, so I can hear you.
Yeah.
So customers often. So when you speak to customers a lot of the time, they'll quite often people will come with their idea of a solution. A big chunk of a product manager's job is to sit down with those customers and work back with them from the solution to what was actually the problem to start with. What were they trying to solve? What were they trying to sort? And take them all the way back to that. And then the next part of product manager's job is to take that customer's idea and also just go and get a bunch of other ideas of how we could solve that. And that's normally working with engineering. If you've got those type of people in the business, it's working with people like yourself to get feedback from other people. It's working with the community and our MVPs to say, hey, we've got this problem. Hey, we've got this problem. We've got all these other things. What other ways could we solve it? And then when you've kind of got those ways, you look at how extensible they are. Do they actually still solve the customer problem you got to? And there's a little bit of why were they proposing? And if they do solve it, you can then kind of go back and show that to that original customer and say, hey, does this solve the same thing? We were looking at something like this way back in Desktop Enterprise. I had one particular ask from a load of customers. I got the same ask from like 10 customers. I broke it down. I looked at the customer pain point. I was like, okay, I don't think what you're asking for as a feature is what you actually want. Would this be, I proposed something that was quite different. So would this be better? Would this be okay? Not just said, oh, no, that's much better. But it was not quite the opposite, but it was very different to what they were asking for. But because that pain point, because they started with a pain point and they leapt to a solution, helping them actually go back and go, cool, what are you looking to achieve? And then showing them other ways that could be achieved that might be even better for them. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, that's super interesting, because I think a lot of times sitting in engineering, when I'm on an engineering team, we think the same way, right? It's like, sometimes you get a feature that has a solution to it, right? And it's like, okay, let's take a step back. What are you trying to achieve, right? And like, because I've had stuff that has references to how to store the data, what database, like what table, right? You're like, no, hold on, like, you shouldn't care if we have hamsters that are spinning a wheel in the data center and monkeys that are writing on paper. If it works and solves your problem, the solution implementation isn't that important to you, right?
And it's kind of that, but at a meta level of a product, which is that they'll be asking for an outcome, but you have to kind of go back to that outcome all the way back to why are they asking for that outcome? What's the pain they're trying to solve? And is that the right outcome for that pain? As there's a lot of ways to solve a lot of problems that produce very different experiences and very different solutions. And they're not all equal a lot of the time anyway.
Yeah, 100%. Let me give a shout out to all of our, in India. We have a huge community in India. So I would say, reach out to the community there. There's got to be a Docker meetup close to you. They have like thousands of people that join their meetups weekly and monthly. So that's a great place to start. If you get stuck there, reach out to me on Twitter and I'll get you pointed in the right direction. Also too, I'll put the links up. There's my last year's getting started with Docker Talk is about 20 minutes, very fast, but very condensed to give you an overview and a high level view. And then I highly suggest download desktop and run through the tutorial. The tutorial's fantastic. You'll start from the very beginning, and it has a great narrative through a developer's perspective of building, running, managing containers, networking, kind of local development. So those are the two best places I would say to start. And we have one of our captains watching us. Thank you for the green heart. Send it right back at you, Nuno. Cool. All right. Sorry. I had to do a couple shout outs there and say hello to folks, but yeah. Well, that's super cool to understand. One, that Docker takes feedback from everybody. And we really, I always say every show, Ben, I always put out the roadmap and tell everybody, please go use it. Go look at it. Our PMs are definitely in there. They use that constantly from our CEO down.
So actually about an hour ago, me, Donnie, who's head of product, and Scott, who's our CEO, we spent 45 minutes looking through the 20 most recently updated tickets in the roadmap together. And we spent about 30 minutes just doing that. And that's with the head of product and the CEO of the company. And we just went through and we read the latest comments. I went before that, I'd gone through the last 2 weeks of comments and changes, checking what had happened. And the three of us went through the 20 top tickets and the top changes and looked at the comments, looked at what people were asking for, looked at the sentiment, and kind of talked about why are people asking for this? Should we reprioritize it? Should we do this sooner? So yeah, it really is like from Scott down, we all spend time in there looking at that and reading all the comments and getting all that feedback. Yeah,
100%. Awesome. And I think you might have some things to show us.
Yeah. So
I don't let Ben on unless he brings goodies for us. And since we're not together, I can't request chocolates. We have horrible chocolate here in the United States. If those internationally didn't know that, Hershey's Kisses are not chocolate. Sorry, Hershey's. And sorry, I'm going to get hate on Twitter, but yeah, you just.
I quite like American chocolate, even though I'm European. Yeah. So this is one of the first things that we've been playing with that's a bit new, which is a much bigger redesign for the Docker desktop UI. So we've been talking about what we've got today, which is kind of it was really kind of the MVP release of what we wanted to do. And could we level that up? Now, this isn't final. It's one of the things where people are like, oh, that looks amazing. When's it going to ship? I'm like, well, this is a design. No code has been written for this yet. So it is just a design. But it is what we're thinking of. And there's quite a few, there's some bigger changes and some littler changes. So obviously, some of the smaller things is it's got just a little UX overhaul, trying to show some of the resource usage. Bigger things, exposing networks, exposing volumes, actually having access to sort of explore and get some of the broad hub content in there as well, which I think is on the, nope, I don't know where that is. Yeah, so being able to sort of explore that broader hub content, search, and actually sort of get more of that going from the desktop side of things.
Hey, Normal. He says he loves it. Hearts.
Good. Some of the other ones that we're thinking of or playing with are looking at different ways to share and collaborate is one. So the ability to take a running container, hit share, get it to do a snapshot, and just send a version of that to your colleague who just gets a notification and can just pull that container. Probably not and run, because that's a bit sketchy. But we were playing with different ideas. So very much there, what we're looking at is one of the things I heard from a few customers was, particularly in the world we're all working, where we're all remote, the ability to kind of just go like, hey, check this out is a lot harder to do now. And we kind of wanted to look at how we could do that. Is there a way that you might want to snapshot containers as well in the state they're in? And a lot of people I talked to, the way they were sharing work in progress containers is that they were pushing them to like their personal private repos, because their main repos and their teams were for the CI, for production ready images.
Right.
So I was like, cool. Is there any interest in just being able to just share an image to people quickly? Just, hey, here you go, check this image out. Hot swap it into your compose file. So we've been playing with that. Maybe doing them as ephemeral images in Hub as well, so they're short-lived. What we might do there.
Yeah, when I first saw this, I mean, super cool, right? But then, okay, let me step back and, think about it for a second. I was like, oh, but yeah, well, why don't I just push an image? And it was what exactly you just, I don't want to push an image to a repo. I don't want to create a repo just to share it with Ben, right? In products. Say, hey, Ben, check this out. I'm working on that feature, right? It'll muck up my, my hub instance, blah, 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 right? So something ephemeral, short-lived. Yeah, that's super cool. And just being able to use something I open up and I'm placed like a time capsule right into where I need to be, right? And it's configured, ready to go. With PRs, this, in my opinion, this is huge, right?
Yeah, and that's where it kind of came from, which is that we've got other tools where it maybe spins up an environment for each PR, but even pre-PR, how do you just quickly share something that's in progress? How do people, if they've built something on their local machine, but they don't want to push it or promote it somewhere, how do they just get that to someone quickly? And is that you just have more repos? So every project has a dev repo for each of the images. I was like, that kind of sucks. Maybe it might be a good practice. Maybe that's what we should encourage. But I was like, this could be quite fun anyway, having the ephemeral image store, but also having the ability, which I've got on another slide, not just to sort of push it to a particular person, but also to do the sharing by links as well. I thought would be quite cool, because then you could also kind of have buttons or links on Hub, so that you've got a button on Hub to pull an image. So rather than doing the Docker pull, you can just click images to pull them. It's a small thing, but it's useful for us on Hub. People might want to do that on GitHub repos. If you've got images published for your products, you might want to just pull from Hub as a click for your desktop users. So creating that sort of shareable link that you can just paste to someone also seemed like quite a cool flow as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it attacks a cultural view, right? Because I know I've worked at some places where if you cut a PR, right, it's going to get reviewed, and that's a whole process. It's almost a combative, process, right? And you're almost sharing your art with your team, and depending, and it's a little bit more formal kind of step. But if you have this little bit, I hate to say loose sharing, right, or quicker sharing, right, it just opens up the sharing and working faster. And I hate to say that, right, because doing complex knowledge work faster is not always better, but
no.
Right. But being able to get something to you quickly and it just works, right, is especially in this remote world, be able to collaborate that quick, right, is huge, right? Huge.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about those. Yeah.
I skipped over one of the others to get where we are. So I hinted at one of the other ones.
So Gannon, for you, seems awesome to get your ID up and running with Docker, with the project from Docker Desktop, and sharing capabilities really nice. Yeah. So we got to go into the roadmap and comment. Yeah. Thumbs up. Oh, Ben, I always forget to ask you this after I come off the show is, should I call it thumbs up? Like what's the nomenclature for thumbs
up, I guess. Because there are other reactions that are also positive, but I quite often just sort by, in GitHub, you can sort by the number of thumbs up. So I thought sort by the number of thumbs up. Though me and Donnie were chatting about if either of us have time to write a script to aggregate all the reactions and comments to produce like a single meta score in GitHub, because I kind of care about any reaction engagement. And there is no way in GitHub as a PM for me to sort in a repo by like all reactions. There's only by thumbs up or thumbs down. So it's, if you do other reactions, I might see it, but it's not when I do a quick sort. It's not what I'm going to see for now, unless we actually do the script to like do the meta checking.
Yeah.
Which I quite like to do.
Yeah, that script sounds pretty interesting.
I think it'd be quite cool.
100%.
So the other one we're playing with, which I'm quite excited for, is update notifications, which I hinted at earlier. Now, this is like a super minimal version of it. I don't have to hand the other version, but what we were thinking of doing was, along with actually saying, hey, there's a new image available, the idea would be that you could click into this and see what's actually changed since the last image. So, hey, there's a new image available. It updates these components of Nginx and solves these CVEs. So you can kind of see that what and why.
Yeah.
You might want to make that change. So that's another idea that we've been playing with a bit.
Oh, I like that. I haven't heard that one. That is really cool. Oh, I have a new updated image. Yeah, but why do I care?
Right. So you'd be able to click into here and it would come down, or it'd pop out and say, hey, this new image has, it's kind of got the like the release notes. So like, if you're looking at a Go image, it would have the Go release notes, and then you'd also be able to see, along with that, we'd be looking to say, hey, and it solves these CVEs, or like it had these open, the old one had these high open CVEs from like the Docker scanning, but these are now resolved in this version. So you can kind of also see that how it's improving your security in your application as well.
Right. Yeah. Super cool. Yeah.
So those in the UI, the current things we're playing with at the moment, along with dev containers, but I think we did a longer demo of that in the all hands. So I'm just going to farm that off to the all hands. And there'll be some more bits coming out in product soon for that anyway. So people can wait and see some bits coming out in product for that. Yeah,
cool. And I'll grab the link. It's the all hands is up on the YouTube channel. So you can watch the whole all hands, see all the demos, videos, talks. I believe we're going to cut those up and get each individual talk as a separate video, so it's a little easier to navigate. But if you look in the comments, there should be timestamps so you can jump ahead into what you're interested in. But yeah, go check that out. It's a bunch of awesome talks. And I know you're saying, yeah, okay, Peter, you're a little biased, and I am, but I was impressed with a lot of the talks. I was interested. I went back and watched a couple talks that I couldn't watch live. Some really good stuff from some captains from the community. Yeah, cool. So where are we going? Where are we going next? What are you excited about in the next half of this year, or 3/4 of this year, let's say?
Yeah. So I'm overall excited by like the direction Docker is like very clearly taking, and I think Scott said this really well at the all hands, because someone asked, like, given the stuff, someone sort of was watching the stream, seeing what we're talking about, and they were like, does this mean Docker is now a developer tooling company? And pretty much, yes, that's what we want to solve. We want to solve general developer pain points when you're working with containers. Docker is not just building a registry, we're building developer tooling solutions. And that's really exciting because it gives us an awesome scope to try and solve things. We've got a great platform to start from with Hub and with desktop. We know people love desktop. We've got tons of scope to do more there. We don't do everything right first time. And there are things in the core product that still need to be improved, but we've got time for that this year as well. And we've got sort of this whole focus on how do we make it easier to sort of build those high quality images with those update notifications, with the scanning we've already got, and what comes next around those. How we make it easy to share these things with sort of that share example, with dev containers, and then with some other things we're looking at there as well. So sort of how can you do remote connection between machines? How can I give you access to the containers that are running on my machine if I want? And then how we can continue to invest in stuff we've done in Run with Docker Context, with Amazon, with Microsoft, with that sort of Docker Context integration to allow you to deploy to other cloud providers. I think the prototype is now up in the repo for going from Docker Compose to Kubernetes with the Docker CLI. I think it only has Compose up, so it's very, very minimal, but it is up there, which is quite cool. So we're going to continue to invest in that bit of the Run experience as well through the year.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, everybody's K8s is get asked about all the time. But one I want to, and hopefully I'm not going to put you on the spot here a little bit, and I'm going to play a little. Well, maybe it's not even playing, but I'm not a daily Linux user, right? I love my Mac because of for various reasons, but but I do miss a pure Linux, dev machine, right? And so everybody's screaming. I get tons and tons of people reaching out. When's desktop for Linux? Why do we care? Why would we care? Number one, right? Because in my mind, I'm like, well, Linux. I don't. I don't need desktop. I don't need to do a little VM. I don't need all this stuff, right? But I know 100% I'm missing something. But yeah, maybe just love to hear your thoughts around that Linux Docker desktop for Linux, or Linux for your peers out there.
Yeah. So I love all the captains who are excited now.
Yeah, they're all. I didn't say WSL2. No, you gotta just teasing.
There are some more things we want to do with WSL2, like the GPU previews coming. Will GA when GPU support GAs. I think Microsoft have got previews coming soon. Well, I mean, there's still the WSL2 GPU support coming from Microsoft at some point, which will be fun when that lands to see what people do with that on desktop.
Oh yeah.
For Linux, it's actually interesting what desktop provides. So I think of desktop as like a handful of different components, really. That's why I'm product manager. It's an installer. So it's what you would call in the industry a turnkey installer, as in you turn the key and it goes. It's an updater, so it keeps your application up to date. It's a load of magic plumbing for your file system, for your networking. It's a VM which runs Docker. It's all the Dockery goodness inside that VM, and then it's the user interface. So what are Linux users after? From the people I've spoken to, they're definitely after the turnkey installer, because right now, if you just install, say, the daemon and the CLI, you don't get Compose. You don't get Docker Scan, you don't get the Compose CLI, or Docker Python Compose. You have to install all those bits separately. So people want kind of a one-click, give me Docker's experience.
Right.
People want to stay up to date, and you have to kind of manage that yourself. So people want to stay up to date. Some people do want the UI, the ability to manage starting, stopping Docker from the UI. Some people also do like the UI. We do get a signal that people would like that UI to come over to Linux that we've got in there today, or the new version. I'm sure they'd like more. And then the VM actually gives some, for all it gives some downsides. And I know people, I'm not ignorant to hopefully a lot of you actually see me on some of the tickets on the file system performance things. I know it gives those sort of downsides, but it does give you some upsides. So it gives you security, because it means that Docker is isolated to the file systems that you expose to the VM. It makes Docker self-contained, so that bit of Docker doesn't spread out and install on your system. So it's all kind of in there.
Yeah.
And as I say, that security part, knowing what the daemon has access to is a big part of that, and it doesn't need root. So you've got this much, it's isolated from that security side. So those are the things that people on Linux are asking for. Like the ticket's got some really articulate people on it who have said it really well, that, originally desktop was there just to allow people on Mac and Windows to use those Linux bits. But actually, the things we had to build to get people on there, and the value and how we've made those so stable and usable, people are like, ooh, that'd actually be quite nice over here now. Like, that's not just now kind of it's not just a Docker machine or Docker toolbox in a wrapper anymore. It's now a fully fledged, pretty mature, for all it has the odd hiccup. No, it doesn't. Well, it does. Product. All products have hiccups. It's a very mature product now. With a ton of users. I think we've got 3.4 million users monthly now. On Mac and Windows, with the Windows Home support as well. When WSL2 came out, we now have hundreds of thousands of Windows Home users as well. So seeing all of that grow, seeing all those people use it, and all of that value being delivered, I can see why people do want that on Linux, and how that would add value to Linux users.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm maybe stuck in the old days, right, where I was running a Mac and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I want to check this out. Oh, I can't run it on my Mac, right? But it's a it's a Unix based. Oh, but it's not Linux, right? And that's how I originally thought of desktop. Hey, it just gets it on my Mac for me, right? But then, over the years, it's grown into, and we've talked offline about kind of what desktop is and what it allows at the core of that framework, right? And it brings all that goodness that you can bring to Linux, right? And I think while you were talking, I was just thinking about your earlier comment around the process of building features and how you think about that, of solving pain points that developers don't want to deal with day to day, right? Like everything you just said, updating, keep making sure I have the latest, does it all work together? Yeah, that's my biggest complaint, because I'm not compiling open source software day to day. If I do need to do it, crap, I run make, I get a bug, right? I get it, not a bug, I get a, it's not compiling. And now I got to go figure all that out. And sometimes that's fun. That's useful, right? Like, we like to do that, but not when I'm trying to do something, right? Not when I'm trying to get some work done, right? I just want it to work, right?
Right, and that's kind of what desktop has become, which is why I see people's frustration when there are issues, which is desktop has actually become quite a guarantee that Docker will just work. That Docker experience will just work, and that's what people kind of expect from Docker Desktop. I think people who install, I see a higher bar for tolerance with people fixing forward on Linux than I do on Docker Desktop, as Docker Desktop is meant to be turnkey. You turn the key, you've got Docker, it will stay up to date, it will work on your machine, that experience will be lovely. And because for all people have some subset of users have challenges with it, so many people are successful with it.
Yeah.
I think that Linux has kind of seen how successful those people are with that turnkey experience, and they're like, "Ooh,
yeah,
could we kind of have that?" There is a roadmap ticket for this. I think when I checked earlier, it's the 4th most liked, thumbed up, liked. Switching my decision on what to call it there from earlier. 4th most thumbed up item on the roadmap at the moment, on the Docker roadmap. So yeah, that's, and as Nina says, like getting all of those other bits that are outside the Docker CLI in there as well is also a big part of it.
Yeah. 100%. Cool. So as we're talking, right, and this has been coming up, conversations I'm having with a lot of folks internally and externally, but we have DevOps, right? Kind of where's the middle of my picture, right there. Like, I think this is the way my mental model, right? So I'm thinking about DevOps, and I kind of see it in the middle, right? Middle of whatever you want to call that, not just your SDLC, but your whole life cycle of building product, right? A little bit in the middle, right? And then on the two extremes, it's easy to figure out what dev is and what ops is, right? When you go to the far extremes. But in the middle, we're starting to get fuzzy, I think, right? And I know I'm going to get beat up here on the internet, but that's what these conversations are for, right? I think we should have them, right? And if you take out the FUD, right, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that comes with us as humans, right, the cloud kind of our thinking, right? If you set all that aside, what are your thoughts? Where do you see the industry moving with the DevOps, right? DevSecOps is becoming very, very interesting, right? Venture capitalists, I swear, like we should go tally it up. Like billions have just been dumped in the DevSecOps in what month, right? Series B, some of the Series B funding folks are getting, but it's very interesting. So I'm curious to how you think of that, right? Is it a, I doubt this, right? But it's not very clear line, but yeah, how do you think of DevOps and Dev and Ops and kind of how Docker fits within that?
Yeah. So between DevSecOps, DevGitOps, everything Ops. Docker, the company, is the one that wants to kind of act as that pair where you've got the IDE for your coding. Docker is there to be your platform for the dev something ops side of things. It's that bridge into your artifacts. It's that bridge into your collaboration around those artifacts. It's easing the pain of using those artifacts and working with those primitives for your team. So if you think of like more of a traditional IDE that's kind of like the end-to-end experience, Docker is actually still part of that, of your development environment, where a modern development environment has to extend into partly ops as well as being just not just writing code. But coming back to the goal earlier, everything we're trying to do is to kind of democratize down that chain of, as things come down from ops and they start off as a lower cost, we want to help move those things into being repeatable and then being automated and then just being, as Nina said, for desktop, like an invisible tool. We want to turn as many of those things as we can into those invisible tools, or work with partners to bring those best invisible tools in as well. And you saw that with Docker Scan, how we integrated and worked with Sneak to bring that in. Like, they're an amazing tool. It's very dev-centric, very dev-first. So we brought that in, and it's starting to build that experience. And that first step we can see there is that when you push in Hub, we'll automatically scan our images. And I know that Sneak are doing some other things in that space as well, which are also looking awesome to go down that similar journey. And that's why they're a great partner for Docker. And that's where we sit. And that whole flow of things coming sort of from other parts into dev is all around actually it's empowering dev and trying to accelerate that journey to production, which comes back to, developers want to create cool stuff and spend their time doing that. And Docker is purely there to say, how can we keep developers doing that as more things become dev something ops, or even just more DevOps.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, I got one more question. I always love I love your mind, Ben. So I'm gonna pick it. But am I setting that? I might be setting this up too much. But
setting up very high bar.
No, but who are you looking at, or who are you watching? It doesn't, maybe a startup, maybe a big company, right? Like, who's interesting to you right now, and going in a direction you find interesting, or just who are you watching in whatever space that is, right? Just in the tech space. Doesn't have to be DevOps, doesn't have to be tools, but yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, so always the big cloud providers, as they have amazing reach, insight, and data. So knowing what those guys are doing is always interesting. Between them, so one of the ones that interested me recently was the fact that Google offered more of an abstracted turnkey version of Kubernetes. So they've sort of now offered like a version of Kubernetes where a load of the options are configured, are unconfigurable by default. They have same defaults or are controlled for you or automated for you. When you combine that with things like Amazon clearly continuing to lean into ECS, and that's where our partnership is with them, deploying to ECS, and the partnership with Microsoft, with ACI, this focus on actually from the DevOps industry, that Kubernetes is becoming a primitive, and people are now looking to move up originally containers were the primitives, so people moved up the stack to orchestration. Orchestration is now primitive, and that primitive is Kubernetes for the main part. I get ECS isn't, but it's we appear to be pretty set with our primitives, and that people are now looking to move up the stack. And to me, for the whole industry of technology, I personally feel we're about to see the next moving up the stack of everyone. As we had this, there was the historic bottom of the stack, which is where Docker came in, and we kind of created that container primitive. And then the last few years, we've kind of moved up the stack to that abstraction. And you see that with other things like Twilio producing the amazing services they produce. They kind of made those commodities at the bottom of the stack. And I think we're going to see more companies one layer above that. So rather than or even the layer above that, so, where you've got the Kubernetes, where you've got Twilio services, I think we'll see much more broad managed service companies that provide developer abstractions that are a lot higher level. And that kind of fits into that low code, no code space as well, which is rather than just bringing in an identity service. I'm starting a new application or a new company. Do I build my own identity service, or do I bring one in? You wouldn't just bring in an identity service. You might bring in identity and notifications and email and audit logs and SSO and all of this other stuff as a unit, as you might bring in one of those components and commodities today. As we see everyone moving up the stack and up that into that next layer of abstraction and taking what we see today as the things built on top of commodities, or as somewhat commodities, and people start to build the next generation of commodities on top.
100%. And I've made this prediction on the past and on this channel and others. And I say it abrasively just for fun, but Kubernetes will go away, right? And not literally, but yes. I mean, just it's what great technology companies do, right? Is they raise the abstraction level, right? I mean, just look at ourselves, right? You had containers and isolation processes, and these have been around from the 70s, right? But what Docker did amazingly was make it super simple, right? Made it very easy. I could still drop underneath that abstraction and into the lower levels, but it just made it super easy and brought it to the, quote unquote masses of developers, right? And I think that's what'll happen with runtimes and orchestrators, and right, because that's what we want. We want it easier. I don't want to mess around and manage my whole cluster unless I absolutely need to, right? And yeah, and seeing Google come out, I think it was called Autopilot, maybe, or something like
Yes,
that.
it is called Autopilot. Thank you.
Autopilot. Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that, right? I think Google too, in the app space years ago, maybe right before I came to Docker, they had the App Engine on GCP.
Yep.
And when I first saw that, I was like, no, what are you going to manage my app for? No, I do that. I need to do that. I need to understand everything. And then it was just too early, right? I didn't get it. And later on, I said, oh yeah, I just want to put my Flask application in on GCP, and it runs, and you scale it for me. So
I think part of the evolution as well is that all these companies are starting to learn where to put the escape hatches in as well. As there are lots of valid cases for needing an escape hatch and things.
100%.
And this is something we're still trying to learn as we're doing the Compose integration, is where do people need escape hatches to get into the details. So with the ECS integration, we built a few with extensions, but it's not quite right. So we're now looking at actually the ability to pretty much compose a CloudFormation file for sort of your environment variables on top of your application being in Compose. Having that abstraction with the right escape hatches, I think is, as everyone's, because I think those early attempts lacked the escape hatches, which is why people fought back against them, which is it was our way or the highway. Now you've got the right primitives in place and people are building abstractions that have escape hatches in the right place to get into the details again. I think we'll see that accelerate this adoption of the next layer of abstraction of what today we think is abstraction, but will become primitives.
Yeah. I always give this example too, because I'm a big, I really, and I used to get made fun of this, right? But I'm a Visual Basic fan back in the day, right? But I was a C++, Visual C++ developer. Yeah, back in the day. It was some of your lifetimes out there, some of the younger folks watching. But it was brilliant, right? Because building Windows thick, native Windows applications when C++ was painful, right? And doing client service, it was just super painful. And Visual Basic came out, right? And I could create a form with drop and drag, right? It was doing line of business apps, right?
Yep.
And before that, you had to manually lay out your UI, right? And then they had a UI builder, but it was horrible. But the great thing about it, and I think a lot of the C++ and C, old school developers, what they missed was you had that escape hatch. You could call Win32 APIs as much as you wanted, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and there were some issues around, converting data types a little bit, but for the most part, it worked, right? And you could do that last, it wasn't even 20%, that last 10%, you could drop in and do what you needed. But I mean, in elevated development, I was able to build multiple apps for a single company by myself, right? Whereas before C++, it was extremely painful. Yeah, Andre, you're my new favorite watcher, man. Watcher, listener, viewer. We'll go with viewer. Okay.
Viewer.
Yeah, Andre. Yeah, I absolutely. And he's bringing up a classic one, Fox Pro. Yeah, Ben, I think you were just still playing soccer in grade school.
I didn't play soccer. I wrote code.
I was trying to think of I don't know, right? Like, I don't know.
Unfortunately, I didn't play soccer. I was the sort that wouldn't play soccer. I wrote code. It's an interesting one. And like, I think we'll see the next round of startups that appear will all be about this next layer of abstraction. Like I was looking at some interesting ones the other day that were actually all about managing your AWS spend. Yeah. So they were such an interesting model. They ran on AWS to run automated processes to assess your AWS spending to control it. I was like, that's quite meta. What have they put themselves down? But that shows you that, lots of things are also now becoming commodities. Like the billing out of cloud providers is now such a commodity that people are saying, cool, I'm going to build a layer of value on top of this.
Right.
And we find these new pain points in stringing things together. So, the first person says, actually, my example there, I actually noticed that most people who buy an identity service also tend to go and buy a notification service for their customers. Mm-hmm. What if I offer them both in kind of, again, like that turnkey, commoditized, simple way that can break the glass in, but I'll provide them both as a service that they can brand, layer up, work out what integration points they need for their platform, which is really just an identity to use, and I'll sell that. Yeah. I don't think maybe people are doing that now. I haven't looked properly, but it came from I was reading a book where someone was talking about just an identity service. I was like, that will be the next, that abstraction, and across the board is what we'll see.
Yeah. I wonder if it's the same, but I saw startup coming out of Y Combinator. I wish I could remember the name, but they're same thing. They're like, you know, OAuth is great, and you want authorization or authentication,
Yep.
but I want authorization also, right?
Yep.
And when in a prior life at Docker, we wrote our own authentication and authorization service, right? Because I wanted authorization across everything. And it's hard, right? It's complex. It took away from us building features and
Right.
yeah, and I'm sure there's others out there, right? But I think you're exactly right. I want to take these blocks, I want to plug them in. And I was maybe beating up Kubernetes earlier, but I'll beat up my tribe, right? Developers, right? Our jobs, the abstraction layer is going to get higher and higher and higher. And do not shy away from the no code, low code, right?
Yep.
The first things that will come is those pieces that you're continuously writing over and over and over again.
Yep.
Right. You can plug those in, right? How many things have you read a CRUD application, right? Like I just need create, read, update, and delete. Like give me that out of the box. So then I can put value add on top of it, right? 100%. Right. I think Rails was doing that, but sorry.
Yeah, it's interesting what we accept as commodities and that we just consume and we don't. Like, I don't see anyone out there writing their own CI/CD.
Right.
Nor do I see anyone, like when I think I started at Docker, everything was about Jenkins. And all the cloud providers were kind of getting in. And everyone was kind of just trying to get started with all this stuff. And everyone's like, yeah, Jenkins is eating the world. What's Jenkins' market share going to be? And then over like the last year and a half, you've seen GitHub Actions, and GitHub Actions is somewhat eaten the world from a CI point of view. And why is it as to our point earlier? Is it as configurable as Jenkins? Nope.
Yeah.
Is it as feature rich? I'm not knocking on them, but no, because it's not as configurable. So by virtue, it can't be as rich. Does it have like 60 or 80% of the features you need? Yes.
Yeah.
Is it super, super simple, super extensible, and really quick to do that? Yeah. Does that mean a bunch of people are just doing it to get going quickly and are like, you know what, I'll live with the limitation? Yes.
Yeah.
But more importantly, you don't see anyone writing their own. I remember working on projects where we had to build our own build servers and like build processes and test processes. No one does that.
Yeah.
Really now. You just get a CI. And as you say, as you move to low code, no code, a lot more of those components are going to go away, which is good because coming back to the goal, developers should be spending their time creating novel new value, not rebuilding existing value. And that's what that whole trend is towards with the low code, no code, and commoditization.
Yeah.
So any company that's doing that for me is super interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think either of us are saying that this is easy, right? And it'll just be overnight and, you know, and your job is going to go away. Absolutely not. It'll take time, right? These things are complex, right? And complicated. And the job will just morph a little bit. It just changes a little bit, right? There was a big fear with the public clouds that my job's going to go away. Now it'll just run. Well, no. And we absolutely not, right? This is not, but it has changed a little bit. Oh, we got a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Everything will just be more focused on solving customer pain points, which I guess is good for me as a PM because it means I've got more work to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love it. Chris does not like, he's beating up the billing models. We will go into that, but I don't know if we have time to answer this question. And I don't know if it's specific enough, right? Maybe even give tighten that question up a little bit. Or what do you mean by automate the deploying of Docker Compose?
Like because you could, so we have a blog post on doing Docker Compose YAML to ECS, which I think I wrote.
Yes.
And I think which I use GitHub Actions, fetch the Docker Compose to ECS bits onto the instance and use that to deploy. That's one way to do it. Replace Jenkins, depends what you want to use. I would not. GitHub Actions is one option. Other CD providers are available. Hashi have some really cool stuff that's come out recently. I don't know how. I think it's got some pretty cool support for various things. I don't know how the Compose support in it is. I quite like Circle.
Yeah.
I've played quite a lot with Circle.
Circle's one of those that just works. right? A lot of stuff out of the box just works, right? It's like you get up and running really quick, then you can modify. Yeah, we used to have a joke in, I don't know if it's a joke, but a saying, yeah, always the newest junior person of the team, they owned the Jenkins build, right? Because no one wanted to own it. You had to become like a Jenkins expert. You had to know it inside and out. And we used to be careful, say, be careful touching the build, the Jenkins, because you will become the expert and you will be the Jenkins person for your whole tenure here at the company, right?
Yeah, but getting views right, like it's whatever's convenient for your team. Like if you're already in a certain stack, it's easier to pick up. Like if you're already in GitHub and using some of their other stuff, if you're in GitLab, you might want to use their CD. If you're in Atlassian, maybe theirs. If you've already got some build stuff going through Circle, use theirs. Like wherever. It's pretty easy to stay close. Otherwise, you can go out and explore and just work out which one works best for you. There is no canonical answer.
Yeah. And I'm not a fan of rewrites, right? And I would say in this instance too, right? Like, okay, we all need to do GitHub Actions. Let's take everything out of Jenkins and put it, that's a bad idea. Slowly migrate over if that's what you want to do. 100%. Yeah. I think the answer is like kind of with programming languages. I get that a lot, right? Oh, building a new project, should we start with, Golang or R or whatever? It's like, well, it's not just about the language. What is your team's skill sets, right? What's your, how are you going to learn, right? All those things you got to think about, right? Not just,
exactly.
Don't just develop for your resume for the next job, right?
Yep. And try and avoid just using what's shiny. Like, see if you've got people that already know something.
Oh yeah, I'm a shiny object. Yeah, all the infomercials. You wonder how do they make? Yeah, because it's me buying everything. Yeah, the egg fryer and the blue blockers and whatever. Yeah, that's me, the shiny object. Well, awesome. We're at time. We're about an hour. Thank you so much, Ben. Really, really enjoyed having you on. Got to have you on again for sure. Ben, where can people find you if they want to reach out, connect online?
Drop me a tweet at NumberKid9. It's also my GitHub alias. Though if you tag me on things, I'll try to read them. But I get tagged on quite a lot of things on GitHub. If you tweet me, I'll probably ping my email address. We can have a chat. I'm always willing to jump on a call and have a chat with someone. Very happy to. Awesome.
Okay, real quick. So another place to reach out, a general place, is join our community Slack. Ben is in there. I'm in there. A lot of engineers are in there. Our captains are in there. And that's not even the goal. The goal is the community itself, right? There's a ton of folks that are in there that'll answer your questions, to help out. It's a really great community, very, very active. So jump in there. We already talked about the roadmap, but for sure, keep up to date with us. Follow the roadmap. Like any features you like that you're seeing. If you don't see something, put in a ticket, an item,
ticket.
Put in a ticket. We'll review it. Start the discussion. Have discussions on the other tickets in there, right? We really, really do enjoy the discussions, right? It helps us, right, understand what you're really looking for. And then also DockerCon coming up here very shortly in the May. Pre-register. I think our registration might be open. I'm not 100% sure. I know it's going to be open here very, very soon. Our CFP is still open. If you have a paper, a talk, please submit it. If you're a first-time speaker, don't worry about it. Submit your talk. Do the best you can. We have a blog post that William, our head of community here, wrote on how writing has some resources in writing a good CFP. But yeah, please put in your CFPs. We'd love to read them. And then last but not least, you could also follow me on Twitter. Tag me, DM me. I'd love to speak to you. I do give a caveat with helping. It's very, very hard to help on Twitter or even sometimes in Slack for a very complex, specific problem that you have in your environment. So if that happens, we'll try and get you pointed in the right direction. But it's kind of hard to do that in Twitter, of course. But so don't get mad at me if I don't have help you solve your specific problem. But
yeah,
awesome. Again, Ben,
is that, though.
The community is awesome. Yeah, and you'll get more than just one person. You'll get a bunch of experts that can help you out. Fantastic. Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate it. You have a wonderful rest of the evening over there and a weekend. We might be chatting tomorrow morning. Do we chat tomorrow morning? I hope so. Maybe
We'll
not.
chat tomorrow morning.
All
No,
right.
no, next week.
No,
next week.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I'm sure I'll speak to you before that, but have a great weekend. Thanks again. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll be back again next Thursday. Take care.
Cheers, everyone.